not going to give up. We're not going to stop. We want this war to end with just peace. And every soldier were aware of that, not just our commanders.
Big month ahead, and you might expect there to be a lot more noise around about Ukraine this morning, but the fact that there isn't is an indication of quite how serious these talks are. It's heads down, everybody trying to work towards some kind of deal by the end of the week on Ukraine, and by the end of the week here, we'll have much more clarity on how big those cuts are going to be in the spring statement. We'll keep you across all of that. Ukraine, though, does dominate. Of course it does. When Russia invaded in 2022, there was an assumption that Russia would quickly take over the country, but they reckoned without the bravery of Ukraine's army, many of them ordinary people who left behind their jobs and families to defend their own freedom. And we can talk now to one of them. Vladimir Nagorny is a filmmaker by profession, but has been fighting in the trenches. He's currently in the Kharkiv region, with a few kilometres from the front line. Good morning, Vladimir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We've spoken to you before on this programme, earlier on in the war. How's it been for you recently?
Well, I'm in the front lines. It's been a really perfect military career for me as a creative person, because I spent so many times in so different units. Two of the 3 years I'm in the army, I spent at the front lines, and one of them I was jumping from one media unit to another. For my specialty. Right now, it feels at the front lines like the enemy is exhausted, and we are exhausted too. So it's going like back and forth. The drones play a big role in war. And the common sense of apathy from both sides also is very sensible. But we're holding strong, and we're not going to give up. That never changes.
I can see you. Our listeners may not be able to. It looks to me like you are sporting some kind of sling. Are you injured? Were you hurt in combat? What's happened?
It's combat related, but you should see the other guys. It's safe.
I mean, it's a serious question, though, isn't it? Because lots of us, while we are reporting the war and the incursion by Russia, we don't often talk to people who are directly on the front lines. What kind of warfare is it at the moment? You will have documented the shift, I imagine, to drone warfare. How has it changed? What is it like to actually be there?
Oh, I forgot what is it to be, not to be here, quite frankly. It's scary. It's scary. It's hard. I'm very tired. Like in 3 years of war, I only had 25 days of vacation. Many of us are sick or wounded. The mobilization is going on not so good as we expected. But again, that doesn't change the direction we're going to. We're not going to give up. We're not going to stop. We want this war to end with just peace. And every soldier were aware of that, not just our commanders.
I have to ask you a difficult question, but I'd like to know your take on it because you have direct experience. There are often reports that Ukrainian men are not keen. They don't want to fight. They want to do everything they can to avoid fighting. Is that accurate?
I can say that about us, the military people. There might be some ideas like that between peaceful people, but I think it's mostly due to, again, exhaustion from the war and also the very strong influence of Russian propaganda, which we not countering with anything. And that's as a media professional, for me, it's most painful topic.
And that's
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, that's your concern, I imagine, that if Russia is pumping out so much propaganda, that Ukraine needs to try and win the information war, not just the war on the ground.
Exactly, and I don't see much is being done about that. You would be surprised, right? We were having film producers, president. And I've been trying to, because I know how the propaganda works. I know how people make their decision first, and then they look for evidences for this decision. So we have to work with soft power in some more subtle manner than Russians do. But I don't see anything done in this point. And Ukraine now is a very weird position, like a raped woman would be proving that she didn't rape the guy first, or that she's being raped because her credit history is not that perfect. So we have to explain obvious things. And because this war is about values, this is very important to talk about it, not only for our people, but also for international audiences.
I want to ask you finally about how Donald Trump's influence has changed or how it's made people feel on the front line. What impact has Donald Trump had?
Well, of course, we feel betrayed because the United States has been our biggest ally and strongest in the world. But we're also hopeful because we see Europe waking up and Great Britain being a great friend so far. And this support increases. I'm an optimist, even after all this stuff I've been through. I think that Europe is finally realizing that nobody's going to fight this war for us. We consider ourselves part of Europe, and maybe there will be some change of allies. But from the point of view of regular soldier, all I can say, nothing changes for us. We here day to day fighting the Russians, and we're not going to stop. Whatever, no matter what, it's just going to be more of us killed and wounded.
Vladimir Nagorny, filmmaker by profession, fighting on the trenches in Ukraine. Many thanks for joining us on the programme, and do get better for your injuries
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you, Great Britain.
And that's the key point that you left it with him on, Kate, which is they believe, I think, and speaking to Ukrainians, I think they kind of want to believe the US will do something, but in the heart of hearts, they know they won't. So this really does boil down to it. It's a question for all of us in Europe. It's a question for every citizen. What sort of country, what sort of continent do you want to belong to? How much money, how many people, for how long are you willing to support Ukraine against Russia? Are you willing to effectively enter into a continent-wide conflict with Russia? And the question on that has yet to be determined, I think. I mean, there's lots of warm words, but that's the test, isn't it? In a year's time, are we all doing it or not?
I think that's the point. And I think hearing from someone like Vladimir Nagorny, who is on the front line, he's injured, he's been injured fighting for Ukraine. It's so important because we talk about this in the abstract all the time. His words there, it doesn't really matter what Trump says because ultimately we will keep fighting and more of us will die. That is the reality for lots of people in that country. It must feel a complete world away from a lot of this conversation.
Yeah, and interesting, he thinks that they've lost through a propaganda war because some people would say Ukraine have been very successful in articulating the case for their own defence.
Да нет, ты что, блядь. Если я должен оставил чемодан, единственное, где можно не вскрывать, где можно через окно лестницу